Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Before we get started, I also want to start out with a round of applause for the sponsors, the attendees, the organizers, and all the other speakers, because it was such an amazing conference. Yeah. I think one of the things that makes this conference so special, and one thing that I've really noticed from being here, is that it takes all the people to make it happen, to make such a fantastic conference, and that was definitely obvious in my experience here. Also, if you didn't find me hopping around the conference dropping little packs of GitHub stickers the last 2 days, talk to me after the talk. I have a couple hundred left. So I had a little bit of a controversial talk title. I had a couple people ask me, well, what about continuous delivery? What about continuous deployment? And as you can see with the title here, really explaining it in details wouldn't have been as catchy of a title. But what I think is really important is talking about the people. How people are going to be interacting between teams and how they're going to be developing software together. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But start off a little bit about myself. I've been at GitHub for almost 5 years now. I was on the training team for about 2.5 of those years, teaching people Git and GitHub, helping people migrate maybe from SVN over to Git, or talking to them about different Git workflows. There was a talk earlier today that I quite enjoyed as well. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been a solutions engineer. And what that means is that I engineer solutions. But besides just engineering solutions or trying to come up with clever ways to describe my job, instead of teaching people Git and GitHub now, I implement GitHub at their companies. So a lot of times people are using GitHub, but they don't know how it integrates with a certain tool. Or they want to move a CI system from, maybe they're going from Jenkins to Circle CI, or they want code analysis with SonarQube, and they want to make sure that's set up in the best way possible. Because when they move from these tools, they get new abilities. And so going from one tool to another, they're often looking for the expertise of what to look out for. And in all this time that I've been at GitHub, I often run into the same conversation over and over, especially at conferences. And I've talked to thousands of developers at these conferences or on site, and the conversation usually goes a little bit like this. I love GitHub. It's really changed things. Oh, that's great. Do you use it at work? No. It's too hard for me to make that change, which eventually makes me a little sad. Because it's that specific part, for me to make that change, that I want to focus on and I want to talk about. This is a journey that a lot of companies go on when I run into these conversations. It's the start of a journey, realizing that there is ways to start on this, and as a developer, you do have power to make this happen. So a quick poll. How many of you feel empowered to actually make change happen at your company? Be honest. Okay. So a few people, but not everybody. So, I mean, maybe in a couple of years, if I give this talk again, everyone will raise their hand and mission accomplished. But what I love about the companies that I've worked with and that I talk to all the time that are doing the things that I think are appropriate and smart and going in the direction they need to go in is that they have one particular thing that I've noticed in common. They focus on people. So we have a GitHub customer talking about using GitHub to enhance the collaboration at their company. DLR Robotics in Germany, the Institute of Robotics, they chose a tool because it's what the developers preferred. SAP, collaboration between all those distributed development teams. I love this quote too because SAP is such a big company. They have so many thousands of people across the entire globe, and they are truly distributed. But the workflows that they do here, or that they're referencing in this article, is the same that any company can do at any size. So that's what I think is specifically unique about this. So this got me thinking, right? I see companies talk about this. How can I help others kind of pass this message on? So to take a little bit of a step back about collaboration, maybe before internet, what I love about this photo that I found is not only is it low res, when I tried to show it, it's also, it aged itself by having the CRT monitors in it. So in the classic days of LAN parties or hackathons, people crowded around a particular computer. And this is just from the Wikipedia page of collaborative software development model. And I think, one thing that I'm seeing, speaking about SAP and distributed teams, is that this isn't really the way that people are developing software anymore. They're not crowding around a computer. And similarly, thinking about the definition in some of these Wikipedia articles as you just go and look about this, a kickoff meeting might have meant, okay, let's bring the customer to see what we're working on. We don't have a URL just to share with them, for them to see what we're doing. Let's bring them to come and talk to us. And, open source got its idea from this, showing your work, bringing the customer to see the code so they can understand it. But, hopefully we're moving a little bit beyond this. So with all those things considered, let's jump in and look at some common themes and some common patterns that I see at GitHub internally, but as well as these customers I talk to, these people I run into at conferences, these people that I've helped along the way. And the first thing I think that helps with all this is sharing. There's a common phrase, sharing is caring, or caring is sharing. And I'll start out with a quote as made popular by John F. Kennedy, President of the United States. A rising tide lifts all boats. And I think though he actually didn't come up with this, he sure as hell made it a very popular slogan. And it's one that it's stuck with me for such a long time, from teaching people about Git and GitHub to helping people with software development, right? If we can raise the level, default knowledge that people have, well, then they can go do better things. So another thought experiment. Does anyone know how much money it actually takes to retrain a given software developer? Of course, this is particular depending on how many people you have and where their experience is. And there's a paper from Gartner a long time ago, so it ages itself a little bit here, but it's from 2000, and it talks about the amount of time it takes to train a new Java developer, estimating around $9,000 to be spent on training and another 12 to be clocked up on lost productivity. Okay, this is all common stuff. We may know this. We may be comfortable with this already. And what I like here is that Martin Fowler, also the venerable, smart Martin Fowler, talks about the time it takes for people to get used to working with each other. Right? Collaboration itself isn't necessarily a new topic, but moving from one team to another, now there's a little bit of a struggle that people might go through. And he goes on to say that it's difficult to give any concrete advice here. Any experienced project manager, he asked, always rightly points out that there are so many variables to take into account for training, for ramping up people in this article he talks about. But I think, and I've seen, that it's easier for people to ramp up as they have had better exposure into the code base, better exposure and openness into the way other teams work. Great. So, first thing I want to talk about is ChatOps. How many people caught Melody Ryback's talk earlier today? She talked about this. Great. So you can put on headphones and not listen to any part of this. But her talk was so great, and I'm happy to hear other people talking about it, because this is something I'm really passionate about, and I'm happy to see other people talking about it, because this is a pattern that other people can start to implement at their companies. Now, I'll give a little bit more details about this. If you missed the talk, how many people are actually using ChatOps today? All right, how many people have Slack? Great. Okay, so it's going to be really easy for all of you to do ChatOps on Monday then. If you don't know what it is, ChatOps at its core is a bunch of scripts written and that you can call from a chat room. So in a lot of times, you do this from a robot. In our case, you may have actually saw it on my desktop before I got started. This is a robot called Hubot. The concept is getting more and more popular of ChatOps because of these talks and because of this little robot called Hubot. Hubot's just a Node.js application that you can deploy really easily to something like AWS or Heroku, actually. And then Slack has some information about how to easily tie that into your company chat or your friend chat or whatever it is. And once you start doing that, hopefully you'll start seeing more and more people actually using it. And I've seen this implemented at small startups and big companies as well. So it's very interesting to see. So solution number one, do something like ChatOps. And in this example, you can see at the very top, my coworker Tom Osowski, he's asking Hubot here to rebuild CI. So he's prompting the robot with the period, and then he says a command, and then he gives the arguments. And then once CI passes, he deploys to master. This is more notification-based, but it's information-based. It's awareness-based. Hubot has been integrated between GitHub and Slack and our CI service to report the information that's going on here. So immediately what happens here is if I don't know what is going on, what these people are doing, and I'm new to the team, I might just be able to sit into a Slack channel and just watch what's going on. Here we have Charlie's sum at the top using, I hate acronyms, but Charlie's using an acronym here, .wcid, or where can I deploy? And as this goes on, more and more actions are happening on the screen. Charlie ends up deploying to a different environment. And you see someone else here at the bottom, Garen. Garen asked to be queued to deploy because of the way GitHub does its deployment model. But of course, this doesn't have to be for company development-based things. We have a couple people from the sales organization here grabbing a quote for work down at the very bottom, grabbing our GitHub Enterprise software architecture diagram, because why remember something if a robot's just going to be able to get it for you, or where our company headquarters is at the very top. So I think all of these things are nice because it starts to share the information. All right, full disclosure here. Team discussions haven't shipped yet. So this is not out yet, but we have already talked about this, so I was okayed to talk about a feature without it being live yet. This is something we announced at GitHub Universe in October, so just last month at our global conference. This is something I'm really excited about. So on GitHub now, a pattern that I've seen over the years and that we've done even internally at GitHub was we would create a repository just for a team to have a discussion. But now what you're able to do, and this will build on the topics later, is have just your team that you have within your organization and have a discussion about that. So if any team-wide announcements need to happen, put it on the discussion board. If you need to have a private conversation on that private team, put it on the discussion board. That'll be marked as well. And you can pin conversations also. So this makes it a little bit easier for people who traditionally, it lowers the barrier of entry of sharing information. Previously, people would have to create repositories, open issues, and create information there. And now we've streamlined some of this workflow that we've seen by creating team discussions. Team radars. These are really nice to automate, but you don't have to automate them. You can use the API to do this, to automate it. And this is more of a pattern, less of a feature. So this is what I essentially wake up to every Monday morning before work for my team. We have an issue that's posted by Hubot using the API, and there's different subjects inside there. And what's nice about this is team radars are time-boxed threads where folks are going to be sharing what they're up to asynchronously. If you have a blocker, you put that on the radar. And maybe you follow up with that with a direct mention or something like that. Because when you have daily stand-ups, and I think a lot of people do, maybe weekly stand-ups, you may have to save that disclosure of the blocker until tomorrow because everyone will be there, right? But if you have it asynchronously, you're able to just share that information right away. Hey, by the way, I'm going to have a blocker later this week because Melissa, it hasn't merged her PR yet, and I'm just waiting on that before I merge mine. And I think that's good too, because you can see here Vitor is actually saying, hey, I'm going to be out for 2 weeks. So maybe he's going to be missing the next couple stand-ups. Maybe he's not going to be able to be there in person to hear about those blockers that someone has. And, you know, I think this is really important too, because how many people have families? Right? What happens when you have to leave work or you miss the stand-up, you miss information? So if you have things asynchronously, people can always catch up later. And then, you know, just to expand this a little bit, in the work in progress section of ours, we run a little bit of analysis of what issues might be stale, what issues need to be bumped again to work on for people to actually do. So this gives us exposure to each other's work, but that's not really the important part here. If I have someone else covering some of my work because I'm out, and they're interfacing with another team completely, someone from product, someone from support, they can see the context of maybe I'm going to be gone, maybe I can give some context into my week here. I'm letting other people outside my team see this because we're putting it somewhere that's accessible for everyone. How many people have a GitHub Pages site? All right, cool, good. Hopefully after this you'll have another Pages site, or you'll share and tell more people to build Pages sites. But I bundled this with a good README because not only can you launch a Pages site from just your README, but I think they kind of go hand in hand on the form of sharing information. Electron's an open source library that is built with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS for kind of cross operating system desktop applications. But this README is so beautiful to me that I've seen it, and I've seen this pattern in a lot of open source projects, talking about how the builds are doing, how much coverage does it have, how do I get started, where do I download this? This is an open source project that I recently saw. This is from a company called Capital One. They're a really big bank in the US, probably globally. But this project's called, and I have to make sure I pronounce this right, Hygeia, which is a Greek word. And this is a DevOps dashboard. So I imagine that this would probably be beneficial to a lot of people in this room to take back to your companies. But what's so nice about this is we see how it's broken down in the README. And additionally, they took that information and just launched it as a Pages site as well. So if you have this information and you want other people to know about what your team is working on, how to get started with your team's projects, make it easy to read that information and make it pleasant. Don't just do it in plain text. Use images, break things up with headers, use these common patterns. So, summary of that first part. Allow others to actually learn from your work. If you don't put it out there, people aren't going to know about it. I think my coworker Greg says it best here. He says, well-informed people are the key to building better software together. And I think that makes sense to me. So in the category of reuse and discovery is a really interesting one that I see resonate with really large companies and even companies around 100 people total. If, at some point, you're not going to be able to know what everything everyone in your company is working on. So pattern number one, I mentioned put everything out there. But even if everyone's putting everything out there, you might not know where to find it. You might not know how to find it. I think this is an interesting diagram here. So again, raise your hand if you or a friend has built something at a company that's just the same or nearly the same as somebody else. You've re-implemented some kind of React implementation, or you fixed a bug in some library that someone else then later had to use. All right, this happens. Person on the far left there, maybe they're working on something that the person in green would benefit from. But what if it's like this? How do these people collaborate? I don't even know really, well, I do because I put the slides together. I don't even really know where yellow and green and blue and purple are in this graph. So you got to make it easy for people to find the information. Without finding it, it's kind of just useless. So what's the solution? How do we fix this? How do you fix this? How have other companies fixed this? Well, one way, perhaps other people have heard of this terminology before, but forming guilds to promote this information and actually talk to each other between your traditional groups. So Spotify is an amazing customer that I've worked with for many years, and this information that they've shared is, I think it's from 2012 or 2014, so it's not new, and they've adapted the way they've worked since then, but the principle still holds true. And they say their squads are responsible for talking to each other because they have autonomy to make decisions and talk to each other and share ideas because they promote that. But they also have guilds of people who share similar information or have similar interests and want to talk to each other. And though this is a little bit dated, I guess 5 years in software development is a long time, this is something I see very large companies still looking to implement or finding out today and knowing they need to implement. So though I say 2012 or 2014, don't take that as something that you shouldn't do. This is something that every single company I've talked to can benefit from. In fact, even GitHub can benefit from this. So GitHub's approach is nearly the same. We don't call it that. And we take a different approach to it because it's not just within our software development teams. It's across the entire organization between finance, parenting, people who want to live in a geographical region, whatever you might imagine. So maybe it's the JavaScript devs and the SQL ninjas, or it's a security response event that would require people from infrastructure, security, development, design, the support team. They all need to be on this ad hoc team so that they can be more well-informed. So, traditional company, multiple teams working on projects, but maybe you have a team of JavaScript developers, security people, or people interested in security stuff, and then the SQL people. And within this, it's very hard to read, but just for the sake of the recording and sharing the slides, this person here is both within the SQL and the security organization, and this person up here is more JavaScript and the SQL organization. So if you think about this, if you have people who are members of these multiple ad hoc teams, they're open, anyone can join them, and it makes it easier for me to be included in what's going on. Additionally, establishing hubs where people can share this information, going where people normally go. This isn't just going to be a GitHub thing before anyone else thinks that GitHub was all I was going to talk about. How many people have heard of MuleSoft or use MuleSoft at their company? Cool. One thing that I love about MuleSoft is their Exchange platform, and where they promote sharing your common APIs, and they're all about API connectivity. Because if I have a place where I can just start sharing my information, and I know that my other developers are going to go there. I might say, oh yeah, there is a Salesforce connector that I want to use because I didn't want to have to implement that myself. Or there's some kind of information in an SAP database that I want to grab as well. Well, I just go browse Exchange because I know that that's a common pattern that my company's doing. And of course, GitHub also works in this way. If you have everything within one GitHub Enterprise instance or on github.com, when you're just looking for things in the community, you can search by a given topic and find a project. And maybe you have to go refactor some code, and so you found that project, you found the context of it, and then you found the conversation. The idea here with both of these pieces, both with Exchange from MuleSoft and just searching on GitHub and finding things out, is that these things are where people are going. Searching, a lot of people are going to be searching Google, and it leads over to GitHub, or it leads to a Stack Overflow question. But having those places and established for you to go find things are very useful. So you can see the full context of this conversation if you needed to maybe go fix that a little bit later as well. So, end of the second part. One part left. So, first pattern, we put things out there. We shared more information, which is kind of just like screaming into the void. No one's really listening. We should use tools and ideas and look at the patterns of our other users, our other coworkers, and find out where we need to start putting that information, or maybe direct our screaming. But really, at the end of it, to help make all these people come together to work on better tools, we need to have a better approach to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So this is what everything has mostly been building up to. And this is an interesting statistic done by the McKinsey organization. And I'm not just talking about gender or race. I'm talking about all types of diversity here. And I think this is super important for software development. There was a talk earlier today from 1 to Infinity talking about how to grow a software organization, or to just grow an organization, by Federico, sorry. And I love that so many other speakers here have been sharing some of these ideas as well. But if you don't have diversity, you just have the same people recreating the thing over and over again. It's not going to be really new ideas. You're going to be slow to innovate, which he also brought up. So if we think about software, think about agile best practices, that should be the same way our businesses are functioning as a whole. Our innovation shouldn't be revolutionary every time. This should be small, incremental. And this is the way that large companies, as this article mentions, 3M, Apple, Google, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, but I think software really fits this pattern as well. So the first thing to do, adopt this concept called InnerSource. And how many people have heard of InnerSource before? Okay, 2 people. Everyone else needs to talk to me afterwards. InnerSource isn't really too much more than a clever title. It's like open source, but it's inside your company. It's not really anything new there. But if you're doing a lot of what I mentioned before this, you're going to have a lot of this work already done for you. So my coworker Boss wrote a really good Medium article that I reference at the end of my slide here, end of my presentation here. He maps out some good strategies for how to adopt InnerSource within your company. And as he points out, it's not something that happens overnight. Just knowing about it, thinking about it, is going to get you in this right path. And, this is the way that large companies are working. Bloomberg, Walmart, Scania, Zalando, PayPal. They've all been advocates of open source. In fact, I think PayPal might be one of the largest. They're one of the people who have popularized the term InnerSource, and I see this working. I see them talking about it to new companies, shipping material, and working as well. But what's interesting about InnerSource is not just that it's something that software companies are doing, but it's, look at all the other people on this chart. Domain experts, security people, executive leadership. If you truly go towards an approach of InnerSource, you're going to be working in a way that includes these diverse backgrounds and these diverse people. What would happen if you're working on a new project and it's machine learning and you haven't even thought to involve anyone from finance who might have a background in machine learning? If things are out there and things are welcoming to those people, they might be more encouraged to share their ideas. If you want to find out a little bit more about InnerSource, PayPal is the kind of the chief shepherds of the InnerSource movement under the InnerSource Commons. URL is just hosted on a Pages site as well, on a GitHub Pages site. This is really good to go find out. Find out more about. I've seen people within the InnerSource community getting together, sharing ideas of how they can further the cause at their own companies. And I think having this is pretty fantastic. So building on this idea, more diverse ideas are better. More diverse ideas are going to allow you to innovate better. Well, this is a technical conference. I think having an inclusive workflow to allow people to share their ideas is important as well. Maybe depressing fact from Harvard Business Review. So as it says here, women did not receive any benefit in status or leader emergence from speaking up. Let that sink in for a while. If they did, they saw no benefit from it. This is why it's important to have such an inclusive environment, not only in your company, but from the way you're also working. Now, if you were up at the Git Talk upstairs earlier today, you may have seen this workflow. This is typically the way GitHub works. We have a feature, we make some changes, we open a discussion about it in a pull request. Then we have the back and forth. But, this isn't really a novel thing to just GitHub in the platform anymore. But I think by having this, you allow people to share ideas. You're defaulting to open. If you can have more people work in a simple branched workflow like this, more people are going to share their ideas. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, but how do you make it so they have to do this? You protect the branch. You make it so they don't commit directly to master, so they feel safe to just create a branch, start a discussion. It might not go well. They might close it out. So, hey, don't worry. You're not going to be able to push directly to master because these are some required statuses that we need to have fire off before it goes there. This is the way our docs team works, the team writing our documentation. And, of course, require the branch to be up to date. So if there's anything that made it into master before I did this, I'm going to prevent that as well. Last but not least, one of the hardest parts is actually forming a team to do this. Show dedication within your company by actually taking a stand, forming this team, whether it's within your HR function, or you form a whole new business unit to do it. I think you need to have this to actually do this. To have someone who's going to be responsible, maybe there are certain people within tribes within your company that are going to be dedicated to doing this, but do it. So that same Harvard Business Review mentioned managers who amplify women's ideas intentionally given extra attention to their suggestions. So if you don't have a team, maybe talk to your managers, find squad leaders who are going to be able to implement this because it has to start somewhere. And if you don't take that first step, things aren't going to go well. The thing we'd want at the end of the day is that we want everyone to be able to have a say in what they're doing. If we go back to the beginning, thinking about some of this work, we want to make it easier for everyone to be at their best. Inclusive culture. So, what's next? So in my talk description, I mentioned how you can adopt these patterns within your company. And I think the key here is you, the developer. One thing I constantly realize is that, just like in that scenario in the beginning, just like all the people who didn't raise their hands, people don't feel empowered to make any of this change. But if we want these things, if we believe in this stuff, and we actually want change to happen, we're going to have to start asking for it. We're going to have to start speaking up. We're going to have to start speaking up for each other and helping each other out. Because I think as developers, we have a lot more say in what's going on than we realize. We have a lot more ability to have our companies innovate and be successful, because without us, they are powerless. So you're the ones who are driving the change. And there's people out there to help you make this happen. I saw a dozen sponsors upstairs who are here to help your company make a change, to do whatever it is you're needing to do. Talk to those people. Start sharing some ideas about how you can formulate a plan to make these changes happen. And I'll end with a quote from the Harvard Business Review. The frontier of human productive capacity today is the power of extended collaboration, the ability to work together beyond the scope of small groups. Today's technologies have the potential to enable a very they have the power to enable a very different level of business performance, but only when accompanied by thoughtful redesign of the way your business is done. Thank you.